Hello, we are back again, having explored the role of innovation and talent in the new landscape and in shaping the future of cities. We'll now move to our next session on innovation districts overview. Over the past 2 decades, we are witnessing a clear shift in the geography of innovation, a transition to urban innovation districts, from the development of Silicon Valley and the Research Triangle Park to Kendall Square in Boston, to 22 at Barcelona and the Cortex Innovation Community, among others. By conservative estimates from the Global Institute of Innovation Districts, there are now more than 100 innovation districts emerging across the globe. These districts are physically compact, mixed-use, vibrant urban areas where all innovation ecosystem stakeholders connect and cooperate, formally or informally, to create innovation. We are honored to have today with us Mrs. Julie Wagner, President of the Institute of Innovation Districts, who is one of the first persons to recognize this trend, and through her research work at the Brookings Institution and the Global Institute of Innovation Districts, has contributed extensively in understanding and advancing the concepts of innovation districts and how innovation advances the prosperity of cities. The report, The Rise of Innovation Districts, co-authored by Bruce Katz, and her continuous research on innovation districts has been hugely influential. Julie, we are warmly welcoming you to Thessaloniki, and we are keen to learn more about the concept of innovation districts and how your insights on how cities can evolve into hubs of innovation and talent. Thank you, Julie.
And thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. You're sort of walking into this wonderful world of place-based innovation. I know there's a lot of discussion around how the world is flat and how, with COVID, people are collapsing back into their homes. I think what we're going to find is still the power of place and the power of connecting people in place. And that leads to the power of innovation districts. And this is what I'm going to walk through today, is to really talk through what is it, so to define that paradigm, and to talk through some of their unique strengths and potential. And I see the power of doing this for your event, because in looking at your lineup for the next 2 days, there are a number of people that are going to talk very specifically, very distinctively about specific components. And so I want to try to provide that broader frame, if you will, to support that discussion, which what we're really looking at is this important collapse back, if you will, of innovation back into cities, valuing the proximity and place, and realizing that there is an agglomeration effect to leverage. And so this is what I'm going to talk through. So let me start. I think it's helpful to have a definition. Both Bruce Katz and I, in the Rise of Innovation Districts paper for the Brookings Institution, we did come up with a very simple definition. It's in no way academic, but it's helpful because it captures the essence of what they are. So innovation districts are a geographic area where anchor institutions and companies cluster and connect with small firms, with startups, with business incubators, ... That list goes on. This is your business proposition, your economic actors that come with a really strong set of strengths and capacities that make this area unique from many other economic hubs in a city and a region. But it's not just happening anywhere, and that's the second part of that definition. They're occurring primarily in physically compact areas, or they're trying to become more physically compact. They're transit accessible, technically wired, and they have a mix of housing, office, and retail. And so if you want to really push on the definition, it's probable that you could call this an innovation community, because it's less about just institutions. It's really about this mix of actors and uses and activities that make it vibrant and buzzing and magnetic. So it's all those things. And they're really emerging, as we found through the Global Institute on Innovation District, they're emerging in different regions around the world. And they're also happening in sort of different parts within the city or just outside of the city, but really harnessing very distinctive strengths and assets. So what makes them so unique and so distinctive can include things such as which anchor institutions are there and which companies are there, what their R&D strengths are. Could it be in biomedical and health sciences and they have a predominant strength there? Could it be in engineering and environmental science, robotics, AI, machine learning? Could it be in 20 areas? Could it be in just 2 areas? Could it be in an area where there's a lot of land to develop, and so the reconceiving of a place is a very different kind of proposition than one that has to do a lot of adaptive reuse given the limited amount of development space available? The leadership is very different, the culture is very different, and all of the laws and the rules governing not just districts, but cities and states are so different from place to place. So you can imagine how the journey to go from something organic to something highly intentional looks and feels very, very different. And so if you look at this story here around this particular part of the world, in this particular part of the city, you can see the start of something organic. And now the question is, does this kind of emerging innovation ecosystem want to become something much more intentional, much more defined, much more using a collaborate to compete agenda, working across different actors? This is the question. And this is the question that all these other districts have asked themselves on making a decision on how they want to move forward. So for us, as an institute, a research institute that is grounded in practice, we find ourselves starting to look at these places first through these 3 circles, looking at those economic assets, those actors that I just talked about, the physical assets, the places and the spaces and how much there is, and then the networking assets, which often get forgotten, which is around how people are connecting, how they're networking, how they're learning, and how they're collaborating. So we look at this very quickly, and then we almost sort of jump off into that and look much more deeply into specific areas, including unique specializations such as R&D strengths and how to strengthen those, around critical mass. So how much talent do you have? How many actors do you have? How much technology do you really have? And where is it located? Where is it located? A very important question. And convergence, how the different kinds of research strengths actually are coming together, how the different disciplines and the researchers are coming together that commonly may not come together in very discrete fields to drive new insights and new discovery. So that's sort of one part of our work. And then the other is sort of more around place, thinking around how you create quality connected places that's walkable and bikeable and connected. And also on this buzzing connected community, this blue side, really around how you're creating the kinds of networks and programs that keep people tied together and keep them bound to this place, which is a really important proposition. And then lastly, around how you organize for success. How do you leverage all of this? How do you create a collaborative vision across actor? How do you sequence a financing that allows you to do things such as remake a park? How do you orchestrate programming across? All these things are about organizing for success, and these fundamentally matter. So we look at all of these things as we look at districts. And when we look at districts such as this one here, which is the Pittsburgh Innovation District, and in 2020, we looked at Pittsburgh in addition to 8 other innovation districts across 6 countries to really get a handle of how different and how powerful they can be. We can find in all of the cases that they're powerhouses of R&D funding and activity. And this is really exciting. So here's this proposition that the world is flat. Technology has made the world flat. And what this is saying is that the world is spiky, that there is real concentrations of R&D funding, of talent, and of activity that make these places a strong competitive proposition. So if we look then, and here's Pittsburgh that in just 1 year had $1.4 billion in R&D spending, which says a lot around who's churning out this research, the kinds of discovery, whether there's startups that are coming as a result of the IP that's being generated. All these things start to churn. And with that comes a set of spaces, a set of innovation infrastructure spaces, whether it's institutes or robotic labs or prototyping spaces that are often very, very expensive and cutting edge, and that they are fundamental to advancing the R&D. Now, when these kinds of spaces become more accessible to not just institutions, but to companies and to startups and to others, they become sticky. This is what we call, they become sticky to others to say, oh, I'd like to be physically located nearby to access these facilities. This is one, but by no means the only, reason why we see a co-location effect with institutions and actors such as knowledge-intensive companies and startups. That there is this really interesting coming together in a smaller geography of space and place. As you see here, it's Melbourne and Medellin that we also studied last year. And you see this co-location effect happening in different ways. And interestingly, the alignment between these knowledge companies and the R&D capacities of the institutions can vary quite significantly, especially if they're thinking about a convergent play of coming together of different disciplines, and others that are just trying to be strong powerhouses in, say, biomedical and health sciences. So these kinds of sort of stories start to unfold as we analyze these districts. Further analysis of districts, as we look at the power and the potential, is that it's not just about these anchor institutions, it's also importantly about these other actors that are coming in, playing a facilitative role, a supportive role, that are really working across startups and institutions, companies and institutions, or helping a variety of actors with their translational research, that these are fundamental. They're the ecosystem builders from the ground up. And the more and more we start to look at innovation districts, the more we realize these are fundamental players. And so we started to map and then look more deeply into the role that they're providing. And let me just say again, fundamental. And so for every innovation district or any place that sort of says we want to have this strong ecosystem focus, this is an important kind of actor that you want as part of that story. But so is place. Place also matters, and not all of these innovation districts are highly magnetic and highly mixed yet, but they're wanting to get there. So they've done and created these integrated plans, these master plans at the district level that think about how you create the kind of mix and the kind of activity all along the way as someone walks in the journey that they are supposed to experience, as well as this sort of integrated work at the building level, that the mixing of activities and users and spaces even within one building can be powerful, can be fundamentally powerful in creating a center of gravity that draws a lot of different people, like and unlike people, together from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., that kind of a mix. So looking across scale also matters. Now, I want to move on, just in the essence of time, to something that is fundamental to the story, and that's around place-based innovation, advancing place-based equity and inclusion. Now, if you look at this map and you look at the part that's yellow, just the solid yellow outline, that solid yellow outline is an innovation district. This is one in the United States. And then the dotted or the dashed yellow line is an area that's called a promise zone that has high levels of poverty. Now look at the level of poverty just adjacent to this innovation district. You see these two very different worlds that have been coexisting. So the question really is, how do you create and support the growth of one that also supports and creates the growth of the other in a way that is authentic and in the way that is truly helping to grow the kind of equity that is needed more than ever? And so it's driven a subset of districts to really drive this space. And we're not there yet. I think there's still quite a bit of work to be done. In fact, our institute is going to be real focused on this over the next year and a half, which is to really look at all the different kinds of strategies and programs that really focus on this kind of place-based equity and inclusive growth evolution. And there's a set of strategies, place-based, people-based, actor-led, that fundamentally play a role in all of this. Now, districts are not going to be the solution to all of this, but they have a fundamental role. And there are many places that I have visited that simply should be copied. Like some of the work that they're doing, others should just take, plagiarize, use, and adapt to their local context, obviously, but to really apply the lessons from elsewhere. So these are the things that fundamentally matter, as well as making sure that you have the financing that allows you to do that. It allows you to create the kinds of programmings and the training and the educational opportunities that we're talking about, in addition to the kinds of programs and the kinds of places that matter. So it means thinking creatively about how to have a growing set of actors that help with a diversified financial portfolio. This is not easy. And there's a number of districts that have been at it for a long time that are still finessing this model. And so this is one thing that we're working on with a set of districts, because we believe that in order to ensure not just their growth, but their sustainability, they need to have revenue generating models that allow them to continue to move, to have the programming, to have the types of staff that will support the kind of inclusive growth work, et cetera, et cetera. So this matters, as well as how you're organized. So many of these districts, so these are some of the 9 that we looked at last year, as you'll see, many of them are organizing themselves for success. They're saying we have to work together as a collective in order to reach our new ambition. So some are creating not-for-profits, others, cities that are harnessing it, followed by specific kinds of committees. Others have public-private partnerships. There's different models. And they all have different reasons for wanting to have different models. But bottom line, what they're all trying to do is figure out how can there be a space where some of these leaders and the teams that build as a result come together to forge a future. And this is the kind of local-based empowerment that we're talking about, and why this work is so interesting from both a researcher and a practitioner perspective. So I close with these last 2 slides to say, first off, that organizing for success is fundamental. A vision is critical, and KPIs, absolutely. But if you're not organized and thinking through how to orchestrate this, you're going to end with just a lot of dreams. And so the realization of this requires all these kinds of someone thinking about these, about the people, the governance structure, the deals, the policies that need to change, how the land is to be transformed, how are you going to have value capture? All of these things matter. And so I think my last slide, and I wanted to part with something that I feel very passionate about, is that, COVID has let us know that this world is increasingly challenging, and we're losing lives every day, every minute. We need people, we need places that are on the front lines of change, that are willing to work together in different ways. And so innovation districts have the assets and the attributes and the actors to drive new ways of economic growth and inclusive growth. Our analysis is definitely demonstrating that. But given COVID and given cancer and given climate change, they're also the kinds of economic hubs that have the potential to solve some of our world's most vexing problems. And so I encourage you to really lean into this model and to learn from your peers, many of which are going to be here over the next 2 days, to take this to the next level. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Your insights on the development of innovation districts are surely very helpful to Thessaloniki and the journey that the city is embarking. We'll be listening to best cases from other cities you have mentioned later on. I would like to ask you a question to deep dive on the outlook of innovation districts in the new normal. As already discussed in our previous panel, the COVID-19 pandemic has been a catalyst for fundamental changes in the way we work, communicate, connect, and collaborate. As we rapidly move towards borderless digital business and social ecosystems, are place-based innovation districts still as important?
Well, my short answer is yes. My longer answer is that it's complicated. So I think there's a whole new set of trends that we're all trying to understand. So this work at home, how long are we going to stay in this? Is there going to be a truly hybrid model? Is that model really going to work? Is there a value of going back full time? So that's a broader question that every economic hub is looking at, including innovation districts, okay? And downtowns, and financial districts, right? They're all asking these questions. But innovation districts also have a very unique set of assets, including this innovation infrastructure that requires people actually to go into the lab, that requires people to rely on the kinds of technologies that you can find there. So in many cases, if you were to look at innovation districts relating to, I don't know, a downtown or a financial center, you could call these more resilient in the long term because of the particular assets they possess. But there's more to it than that. And I mean, the complexity of a lot of the information that they have to work through does have a value proposition of the physical proximity. So this is why we're finding, even in the midst of the pandemic, there's been a significant amount of investment underway in districts, from Melbourne to Atlanta to Pittsburgh, more investment in innovation districts for new R&D facilities, centers of excellence, and spaces for community, because they want to create this critical mass. So the numbers are telling us, the market is telling us that this is going to be an area of growth in the future.
Thank you. I'm realizing that in the new reality, talent is becoming a very scarce resource. All geographies around the world are in a race for talent, and innovation districts are no exception. What could Thessaloniki do to support this unique need for talent globally?
So, I learned from a lot of the districts on the ground. I mean, I'm a listener as much as a researcher and a practitioner, and I start to take a lot of the insights that a number of districts have been applying since, early 2000s around talent. And there's a lot of different strategies, right? Some can have very strong talent attraction strategies. The stronger and clearer they are around their unique specializations on R&D, the more attractive it can be for talent to come, because they know they're going to have a pool of very similar thinking types of workers. This is one strategy. Another is around quality of place. There's a lot of stats that show young millennials and others really want to be around quality places with amenities. That's cool and hip. And so you find, even in Silicon Valley, they're needing to remake some of their places to be much more of a talent magnet. So place has a role. But I think the part that's real important is the growing of talent. And so the proposition of a place-based innovation ecosystem is around, how do you grow your local residents into jobs that are evolving in that district? And this alone should be a whole day of a discussion. But this is where you're talking about growing local talent, local jobs, and even local firms. And that is a powerful proposition when you're thinking about how you're growing your economy and the competitiveness of your economy. So it's about growing talent, it's about retaining talent, it's about attracting talent, it's all of these things, but please do not forget the growing of the talent.
Thank you. You have mentioned and discussed extensively about companies moving to be near other companies and talent, and then this magic happens. Would you believe that initiatives and investments in talent in Thessaloniki, such as Deloitte's and Pfizer centers, could form the ground for something bigger in the city? What more needs to be done? What could you advise to the local stakeholders in relation to their effort to establish Thessaloniki as a hub of innovation and talent?
So most of the innovation districts evolve organically. And so you can have this sort of natural agglomeration effect of different actors that are coming together. And often they're coming together for their own reason. And they just finally ultimately decide that there's more that can be done. So if there's one sort of takeaway from my presentation, this is about intentionality. So this is about actors sitting down, leaders sitting down, local leaders, and talking about the potential to be more together. So this is this collaborate to compete sort of paradigm. This is more than a vision and vision setting. It's about a set of common KPIs, how you want to share your talent, your resources, how you want to create common spaces that allow the kind of mixing, how you want to change your policies and your programs, how you want to finance, how you want to organize. This is all about intentionality. So that is the work that has to happen. And that is the work that's happening in innovation districts all over. Those intentional efforts to do and be more. So this is where you have to start. You have to be sitting in a room and starting to have these real deep conversations supported by empirical work.
Thank you, Julius. We're moving close to the end. I valued your point on how innovation districts can contribute to inclusive growth, economic prosperity, and social cohesion. I would recommend closing that very interesting discussion with elaborating more on this very interesting point, if you may.
Look, this is a moment. We're at a moment. I think COVID has exposed the level of inequities, the level of those that have and those that don't. And we have to do more. Many of these geographies, because they have a place-based approach, they're looking at the local condition, will find themselves inclined and to have the imperative to grow people into a stronger future with jobs, with living wages, with greater access to opportunity. This is what happens when you take a place-based approach. You're thinking much bigger than yourself because you can literally see those around you. And in many cases, you'll actually see those just across the street that have much less. It drives an imperative, and it's a powerful imperative to do more. So I encourage as many innovation districts that are listening and others that are thinking about it, that there is a set of goals specifically around how you marry innovative and inclusive growth. And there are districts that are playing with this composition and this sort of marriage of these two things together. And it's a powerful combination, and this is where we must go. I feel very strongly about it, and I think this is where you and all the different districts and different regions are going to find themselves at some point, whether it's today or in the year.
Thank you very much, Julie. I really enjoyed our discussion. Thank you very much for your valuable insights on innovation districts, which actually sets the stage for a whole event and for our next session on discussing with cities that have successfully managed to develop such hubs in the US and Europe. And I really, really thank you for your time and commitment.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.